It's Wednesday, September 11th, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On today's show, it's Water Wednesday. From a ban on herbicides on town property and an innovative way to reduce brush, a science lesson on cyanobacteria, to learn what emergent contaminants are, and keeping our public beaches safe, this episode of Barnstable Today is sure to entertain, educate, and engage our residents. Now for a look at municipal and legislative notes. A comment period and 4 public meetings to solicit preliminary public and stakeholder feedback to inform the Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative, MSI, Task Force Strategic Plan have been scheduled. Anyone interested in participating in the development of a strategic plan focused on protecting public access to and ensuring the sustainability of the Commonwealth's shellfish resources are encouraged to submit written comments and/or attend one of the 4 scheduled public hearings. See the website for more information on dates and locations, www.massshellfishinitiative.org. How does the Water Pollution Control Division control heavy vegetation at the fence line surrounding the facility without using herbicides? Channel 18 went off-road to meet the goats. Yes, goats who are making Barnstable go green.
Hoo, hoo, ma! That's our song when we go to people.
Yeah, we open the trailer, people were all serious and whatnot. We're like, okay, are you guys ready? You gotta help. And we always have people help us. It's fun. And then it's like, all right, and they don't expect it, but at the end when we're about ready to, okay, the last thing you have to do is you have to sing, "Who let the goats out?" We do end up, we have a lot of fun.
We do.
And it's all about the goats, the goats, the goats. We're here because we're trying to maintain the fence line of the property without using herbicides, manpower. So we're using the goats on this particular job as one more tool to be able to offer in our efforts Cape-wide to not use herbicides. We did do a job for Hyannis water towers. We did that 2 years in a row. Around that water towers were a bunch of invasive plants, much like you see here, but they were covered more with poison ivy and that kind of thing. So, of course, being water, they couldn't use herbicides at all anyhow, and they never have. So this was another organic way to go in and clear up around the water towers so that they could get in there and work. We've got a total of 18 goats, and we separate them out into 3 herds. And they go out, and as you can see, this is an electric fence. We fence them in the electric fence, trailer them, and we send them out to work. We deploy them. All the jobs are different. They eat anything from grapevines to honeysuckle to bittersweet to tupela. They're on a job with a lot of tupela right now. Raspberries, any sort of overgrowth like that. Wild, invasive. Well, the invasives take over on the native plants and they choke them out. They're not supposed to be here. So what happens is our native plants, which are homes and habitats to animals, butterflies, things like that, pollinators, bees, aren't able to thrive. And when that happens, the ecosystem takes a shift. The goats actually are usually a lot less money than payroll. The goats don't make as much, and they work from sunrise to sunset. So you get a lot out of them in the course of a day. So you can utilize your employees to do other things that might have to happen. So in a job like this, it's kind of nice, right? They can go and they can get their paperwork done and they can do whatever they need to be doing, and saves on resources, saves on fossil fuel in the big machines, saves on noise pollution. That's an interesting question. I always loved goats. I love animals. I love nature. I love the environment. And my kids had grown up. So I decided that, well, why wouldn't you get some goats? I've always wanted them. So I did. and they were rescues. I spent a year researching what I could do with them to sustain them, and it was just a combination of many, many different things. So I went to training and decided, you know what, I think that we could use this on the Cape. Using goats is not new. Using goats they're one of mankind's oldest companions. They've been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years for doing this type of work. So all we were really doing is bringing things back around to simplifying, get it done, and let's not use herbicides when we don't have to.
Cyanobacteria are one of the largest and most important groups of bacteria on Earth. But when cyanobacteria overproduce, the blue-green algae found in some of our lakes and ponds can be harmful to our pets and sometimes us. Channel 18 tagged along with Karen Malkus Benjamin, Barnstable's Coastal Health Resource Coordinator, to Lovell's Pond and back to the lab to learn more.
Look at the top.
Today we're looking for cyanobacteria. I'm trying to really get a sense of the community of plankton, and that includes zooplankton, cyanobacteria, and regular algae. So even a regular algae, green algae that's edible by the fish, could be making this cloudy, or sediment if it had been a heavy rain or runoff. There are a lot of things that can cause turbidity, but cyanobacteria is high on that list too.
Okay.
This is more a biological approach. There is chemistry obviously involved, but we're looking at the biology and the ecosystem, which sort of gives us a different kind of point of view. Because if certain things are there, you know that the system's working in different ways. Whereas if just looking for a chemical, it's a more kind of concrete thing. We could have a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen in here and not have a bloom, but what I'm looking for is actually why are they blooming and who's in that community. So it's a different point of view.
Okay.
A biological approach. But it seems this year, particularly after all our heavy rains, we're seeing a lot of impact from stormwater. What happens is I think it's a big kick of nutrients and chemicals from the environment off impervious surfaces that gives the creatures in the pond a little extra, and particularly the ones that are very adaptable, like cyanobacteria, it gives them a feast, and so they bloom. And that's what we're having a lot of trouble with in terms of water quality and recreation this June and July. It seems like a hot spot because after heavy rain, all the nutrients are right here, and it seems to be a place where I do find cyanobacteria pretty commonly. I think just because it's that kick. Cyanobacteria loves phosphorus and nitrogen. It seems to get advantages from other chemicals that are human-made, pesticides, herbicides. It seems to survive those better than regular edible green algae. So it's just a place where I think that it's a good habitat for cyanobacteria, unfortunately. And it's that kick, a little kick of extra food. It's like anybody, you get a little more energy and you've got a little more life and you can make more cells. So it's the reason why it's bad is because they're getting what they need. There is climate change and everything's warming up and we're getting more dramatic weather. I think that certainly isn't going to help our cyanobacteria situation. So that's the big picture. The other picture is with all the heavy rains, you have a lot of erosion, so that destroys maybe things that were protecting the pond before, or the water levels have been really high too, and so the shoreline's eroding and there's less protection to begin with. So it's many factors coming into play. I really think the torrential rains, though, the grooving out and carrying with them sediment, even sediment alone can be very bad for a pond. So just for regular creatures, in addition, it brings more nutrients, of course. Pets and wildlife are the first tier of this, and they're impacted very more dramatically because they're smaller, usually not all dogs, of course, but any animal that's consuming the water or living in the water is directly exposed. Dogs, in terms of people type of, or our domestic creatures, are most at risk because they drink pond water. And large quantities and maybe on regular basis. They go out in the morning, they go out in the afternoon. So their exposure to toxins is that much higher. Also, they swim and they lick their fur. Lots of dogs, long-haired dogs, can definitely carry a lot of stuff with them, including the scum. The scum attaches to their fur. So the exposure for smaller creatures, dogs in particular, is a really big concern, and maybe partly why a lot of these notifications haven't gone out in the past. It wasn't a human health issue, but it's definitely part of the spectrum, and it's a clue as to what's coming in the future for all of us, kind of Boeing. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, so not a good photo, but there's cyanobacteria in here, which is toxic, so don't drink it.
Yeah.
If you catch fish, do you catch and release, or?
Yes.
Okay, then you're fine. It's sometimes particularly in the organs, like the liver or the
Did you see anything in there?
Yes, it's hard to see right. You can see a little bit of them. They're,
What's
they're
in
little,
there?
tiny little flecks. See them that glisten green?
I do see them. Yes,
Yeah, that's the cyanobacteria.
What is it? What
it's
is that bacteria?
Yep, it's not really infectious or problematic that way. It's just when it decays, it makes toxins. And this particular species, it's called microcystis, it's pretty much a guarantee that it'll do it, make toxins, that is. So
Affects dogs.
particularly, yeah, so because they
What
drink
about
it.
the fish?
It can harm fish. We're just doing new research on that, how it enters the food chain and at what level they get harmed.
Yeah.
If there's a bad bloom, they can lose oxygen and just die from anoxia because it can overtake the pond. And
How long will that last?
right now we're probably in week 2 of this, and sometimes it just goes up and down. They have a life cycle. We get a really bad one usually in August or the fall. So unfortunately, they're kind of these wave-like patterns. So this one looks like it's getting better from last week, to be honest, but I can't really tell until I go back and look under the microscope.
Wow.
When you're talking about public health, the expediency of what you have here is really what it's all about, right?
Yeah, to me,
so you
yeah.
want to be able to get that information, at least initially,
Right.
back out to the public, and the fastest and most efficient way to do that is to come back here with the samples.
Yeah, and be right where I can send them information out, yep, on the computer. But I use the microscope to identify the species. I'll show you, we use a gridded slide, that's the coolest part of this. More than 70,000 cells, then I would close a beach. Not so much yet, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Yeah, lots of that. This is just from the, I didn't do any filtering.
That's today.
Yeah. Remember you saw them, you're like, oh yeah, I see those little flecks. That's what they're colonies. Oh boys. But a lot of the dense colonies, yeah, what makes me nervous is that these can, number one, double.
Okay.
And that's the other thing I calculate. I do the fluorometry from last week to this week and figure out how much change there is, because if it's really changing quickly, then the bloom is coming even more, but I think we're already getting close to that. We have an alert list so people can get direct emails from the health division. That's one strategy. We have it posted on the web page, and there's a new cyno map through the APCC, the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, where you can click on different ponds all over the Cape to see if they've been tested and or what their status is. So that's a very helpful tool if you're not just staying in Barnstable. But also look at beaches. The beaches, any public beach or permitted beach, which could be an association beach, will be posted if there's any problem. Do a lot of ponds in Barnstable. There are 182. We can't do all of them, and some of them are not really relevant to do. So we have like a top tier of 13 ponds and a total of probably 40 that we do look at. The top tier gets weekly monitoring for sure, no question. The second tier gets bi-weekly. If they have a problem, we bump them up to weekly, and so forth and so on. So there's some ponds we only get to monthly, and if there's no problem, we leave them at the monthly level. Otherwise, you kind of move up this chain of command, as it were, or a triage chain. And it's a way of, with small resources, to try to solve a big problem.
How do you know if the water you drink or swim in is safe from pathogens or high levels of bacteria? The Barnstable County Water Test Lab samples area beaches weekly. Channel 18 took a tour of the lab to learn more.
Well, this is our bacteriology lab. I run the beach sampling program here, but we also do a lot of water quality testing for Cape Cod, the residents of Cape Cod. We also do water departments. They are required to do routine monthly testing, and they bring all of their samples here. We do it for several of the towns, the town water departments here in Cape Cod. So at the beaches, we're testing for enterococci in marine water and E. coli in freshwater. And these bacteria are not necessarily harmful in and of themselves. They're called indicator organisms, which means that they could be indicative of more harmful pathogens in the water. And the reason that we test for these and not for those other organisms, Giardia, Cryptosporidium, the big bad ones that you've heard about, is because it's cheaper and easier to isolate out these bacteria and grow them and count them here. So they're nice because usually when they're present, they're associated with other more harmful pathogens. So those are the two, and those are, we're required to test for those organisms in the Massachusetts Bathing Beach regulations. So we do those analyses, and then if there is a level that exceeds the state limit, then we report that information to the towns. Most of the beaches get tested every week. Some of the beaches have variances, which means they get tested monthly. This has been approved by the state because the beach has 2 years or more of clean data. They haven't had any exceedances. If they do have an exceedance during their monthly testing, then they have to resume their weekly testing. But most of the beaches we do weekly testing for them. So Charlotte, she's one of our beach samplers. She is currently working on one of our membrane filtration stations. We have 4 of them. That's how we do our testing for enterococci, E. coli. We also do total coliform, fecal coliform. These are routine organisms that we routinely use to check water quality in surface water and also drinking water. So basically the way it works is Charlotte's measuring out samples from a sample cup, and she pours it into the funnel. You can see there are 6 glass funnels there. And then she has all of her samples, and then also on the bench she has her media, which we use to culture the bacteria. She's measuring out the samples. Everything's aseptic, so she's not very careful not to contaminate anything. She's pouring the water into the funnel, and then underneath the funnel there's a filter, a piece of filter paper, and underneath that there's what we call a stem, which has little pore spaces in it, and all of this is connected to a vacuum pump that sucks the water down through the filter and through the stem, and then anything that's in the sample remains on that little piece of filter paper. And then we carefully remove the filter paper, put it on the culture media, and it goes in the incubator for 24 hours. And that's what you see over there. Those are our 3 incubators. We also have water baths, a couple of water baths. The bacteria have different incubation requirements. And so those are some of the bulk of the equipment that we have here: membrane filtration, incubators, water baths. We also use microscopes to read the plates, to count the bacteria, and we've got a little bit of that going on over here behind us. So yeah, that's and we make all of our medias and everything here, so that's why you see we're cluttered but organized.
Right.
So we do usually the samplers go out into the towns. We split the Cape up into regions. Each town gets sampled on a different day. And we know within 24 hours of the time, from the time that the sample is analyzed, whether or not there's going to be an issue. And once we know that, we notify the health agent in the town that the beach is in immediately. Now, according to the regulations, the beaches, unless they have a history of repeated exceedances, the beaches don't have to be closed unless there are 2 consecutive exceedances. So if there's one, if we analyze a sample and it comes back with a level higher than the state limit, then we automatically go out and take a retest that day. And then if that retest fails, then the beach has to be closed. But since Cape Cod has such excellent water quality, these instances are actually few and far between. The beach sampling program, if people don't know about it already, it's a great service. It's a good way of knowing that the water that you're swimming in is safe, especially if you're here on vacation and you've got little kids and you're worried about them. Our website, www.barnstablecounty.health.org, we post every day to the website the results, and it's just pass-fail, so it's really easy to look at. Residents can go on there and see if their favorite beach is passing for the week. What day was the test taken? Did it pass? Did it fail? And so that's a really good resource that we have. Also, I would urge residents to look for those signs. We have posting signs at the beaches, or the towns post them. And you want to look for those and make sure you're aware of the water quality at the beach. But it's a great service. These samplers that you see working here are out every day, most of the morning into the afternoon, battling bad weather, tides, and I think it's a great service to the residents of Barnstable County.
You have been hearing about PFAS and PFOA, chemicals in the groundwater and drinking water recently. What are these emerging contaminants of concern, and how do they get into our drinking water? We took a trip out to the Hyannis water supply to learn more.
Emerging contaminants are contaminants that we don't have any regulation for and that are new. We haven't really tested before for them, and sometimes the testing needs to happen at such a low level that the laboratory equipment that we used to have or we had access to wasn't able to do that, and now the equipment is much better, so now those contaminants starting to show up, and we have to figure out what that means, if they're okay, if they're harmful, at what levels are they okay, at what levels are they harmful, and if they are, how do you take them out?
There's two things. One goes with those snouts on it, where the tape is off. Those are more for sampling. So to take samples to make sure you don't get contaminated water, okay? Those have to do with the analyzers. What happens is the chlorine, the pH, which is the corrosion issue, they get sampled constantly, 24/7. And how that works is we run water by them and then dump a little water that gets kind of wasted. So we sample constantly, every minute or so. And then that gets translated into an electronic pulse, and that goes into the system that we just saw, the screen, and then it goes to the main headquarters.
PFAS is basically a group of chemicals, there's like a couple of hundred of them, with all different, very long, difficult chemical names. But basically they deal with issues they are in firefighting foams, they're on Gore-Tex, they're basically dealing with making materials waterproof, so they repel water, and these chemicals are one of the many emerging contaminants, and we're finding out now that these chemicals can be harmful. At what levels and for who is being right now researched. At this moment, we're looking at 6 PFASs, and at this moment, there's an ORSG out, and it's like a health standard for Massachusetts that is 70 parts per trillion, and they're talking about going down to 20, but it hasn't happened yet. So what we're trying to do here in Hyannis is to deal with this issue and to position ourselves with pumping out of certain wells and testing so that we can be under 20 as much as we can. Complicating the issue is because we're in a pretty urban environment and our wells are, that we do have wells that are contaminated above that level, especially Mary Dunn. But there's 3 wells there that were impacted by the Fire Training Academy, and the filtration systems were installed in those wells with activated carbon in them. And after we run the water through those, we get a non-detect, so that water is good after we treat it.
Up next, things to do, places to go, and people to meet. Cape Cod Beers teamed up with Barnstable Clean Water Coalition to create Clean Water Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, an educational series held at Cape Cod Beer. September 11th, today, the panel will focus on oysters and the shellfishing business on Cape Cod. They'll be joined by 3 experts in the field, Liz Lewis from our own town of Barnstable, John Towns from Bars Recreation, and Dave Ryan from Cape Cod Oyster. Join the experts as they deep dive into topics that are affecting not only our water on Cape Cod, but globally as well. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook, email us, or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.